Hi, welcome to Naptime Nutrition. I'm Yaffi Lvova, registered dietitian nutritionist and owner of Baby Bloom Nutrition and Toddler Test Kitchen. Well, welcome back after a long summer. I did a lot of reruns, a lot of throwbacks, and I'm very happy to be broadcasting live again, a few minutes late due to some construction around my house. So let's talk about carbohydrates during pregnancy. The reason why this has come up is because right now a low carbohydrate diet is very, very popular. You have paleo, you have keto, you've got all kinds of stuff coming down the pipes, all these fad diets. And I've done a number of different segments on different aspects of these low carb diets. I did one on why carbohydrates are important and how your body processes them. I did one on the carbohydrate hole, on how we have so many carbohydrates in our diet, why, and how you can make sure that you have a variety in your diet, which is always the key. And when I say the word diet, I am referring to the neutral definition, which is just the collection of food that you put in your face and ingest and digest. That's your diet. I'm not talking about a restrictive plan that's aimed at weight loss. So let's get right into it. Hello and welcome back. So why do we need carbohydrates? Well, to really get the full picture, or 10 minutes of the full picture, go back and watch my other segment on specifically on carbohydrates and why we do need them, and I'll link to that in the comments. Carbohydrates give us fiber, which we need to keep ourselves clean. It's like broccoli, scrubbing the insides of your intestines, keeping everything the way it should be. And when we have proper digestion, it helps to benefit a lot of different aspects of our life, our mood, our sleep quality, our personal interactions, our immunity. All of that has to do with the mind-gut connection. And your gut is filled, I've done segments on probiotics as well. Your gut is filled with beneficial bacteria, and they're like your little pets. And what do your pets need? They need love, they need food. And the food that your probiotics, the gut bacteria, your microbiome needs is found in fruits and vegetables for the most part. Needs that fiber. That's called prebiotics. I also did a segment on that. So we need carbohydrates for energy. The entire point of digestion is to turn food into energy. And we do that by taking any type of food that we eat and turning it into sugar. The body is fueled by sugar. The brain is fueled by sugar. And that's why no matter what you eat, it turns to sugar. So I love hearing when people say, oh, you're going to eat that, it's going to turn straight to sugar. Well, hopefully that would prove that my body is digesting things the way it should. So why are carbohydrates vilified? Well, in the 80s, it was fat. Fat was the problem across the board. You have to get rid of fat and replace it with sugar. Those Snackwells cookies that seem to be the poster child for the low-fat movement. If you look at the nutrition facts label, yeah, they don't have fat. It was replaced with sugar. Part of that was for flavor, and part of that was actually from mouthfeel, for how that product feels in your mouth in order to make it satisfying. If it didn't have that sugar, not only would it lack flavor, because let's face it, the flavor of that product is sugar, but it would be crumbly and dry in your mouth. The sugar actually impacts the texture and how it feels in your mouth, and therefore how satisfying it is. So fat was vilified in the 80s. And then in the 90s and beyond, we are vilifying carbohydrates. We have yet to vilify protein, although too much protein in your body really can destroy, it can damage your kidneys. So we really need everything in a balance. And we're seeing that now with everything coming out about fat and how beneficial fat is, and how fat is good for mood control, and it's good for development in the younger years in the fetal stage. I also did a segment on that, so you can go back and check out why fat is important as well. So what else? We're always looking for the secret to health, and we're always looking for the fountain of youth. And unfortunately, that means taking a specific food group and saying that it's the devil and it's going to kill you. And the truth is that unless we're talking about something that is actually poison, that is actually going to kill you, it's not actually poison or going to kill you. We do need these macro and micronutrients in the right balance in order to support our health. And how do you know what that right balance is? Your body tells you. There is only one calculator that can take in all of your genetic and environmental and lifestyle factors and spit out the result of which balance of macro and micronutrients are going to be best for your health. And that calculator is your body. So the standard American diet is full of carbohydrates. And this is the part that I addressed in the carbohydrate hole. They're easy, they're cheap, they're available. The whole family likes them. Think about it. Pasta. Pasta keeps for a long time in your cabinet. It is cheap. There are constantly coupons available. It's really inexpensive. And when you cook it, you can serve it hot. You can serve it cold. You can make it into a kugel. Still trying to find a good translation for that word, kind of like a quiche. You can do a lot with it. It packs well, it stores well, it travels well. This is why our diet is so full of carbohydrates. And carbohydrates, again, are not the devil. It's the balance of variety. That's what we're looking for. And so a lot of times we really do get into a situation where our diets are really full of carbohydrates. And sometimes when you notice that's going on with your nutrition intake, it's best just take a step back and look for ways that you can introduce some more variety. Look at every meal as an opportunity for vegetables. Add something, put something in the dish or put something on the side of the dish. Oh, Salima says, great info. Thank you. You should probably be at work. I appreciate the comments. So, all right, I haven't even gotten into pregnancy yet. But so standard American diet is full of carbohydrates. And that's the reason why. There's a good reason why. There are time constraints and financial constraints and sociological constraints that lead to our nutrition intake being so carbohydrate heavy. So sometimes meal planning can be helpful because you have a visual of what you're eating and you can see it. You can look for balance before you actually cook, before you even shop. So let's talk about actual low carbohydrate pregnancy. And I'm going to circle back to this point at the end, but there is a lack of evidence. Why is there a lack of evidence? Because it's not ethical to test these things on pregnant women. So what we need to do is look back in history when we have had situations where women had restricted diets outside of their control. For instance, the Dutch hunger study, which is a time just after World War II when there was a lot of food restriction because of the war in the Netherlands. And that gave us a lot of information on what happens when a pregnant woman has a restricted diet. That's not something that could be planned ahead of time. That's not something that would be sponsored by any company because it's not ethical to starve women and see what happens when the babies come out. When we think there's something that's dangerous, we can't put a fetus in that position. A lot of our information, a lot of our nutrition information has come from prisoners. I believe it was back in the 50s, and I think I've mentioned this before, but prisoners were able to negotiate for shorter lengths of time in prison by participating in these starvation studies that gave us a lot of information as far as how many calories you need and level of micronutrients and what happens if you're being restricted on a certain micronutrient or macronutrient. And it's not ethical on so many levels, and that's not something that would be repeated now. So the information we have is outdated. And here's a fun one, was done only on men. So any of this information is somewhat conjecture. We can only look at history and what happens when women starve and what happens to the fetus and what happens as that child grows. So what have we found? Fetal development is really dependent on a constant supply of glucose and amino acids. Glucose being what the body breaks carbohydrates down into in order to use it in the body, and amino acids being the building blocks to protein. Much like you would build a Lego castle, if the castle is the protein, the amino acids are the little Legos, the individual Legos. So a fetus needs that constant supply of glucose and amino acids in order to grow and develop appropriately. If you have a low carbohydrate and a high fat diet, which is similar to what we're seeing now in these fad diets that are being promoted, you could have a high weight fetus or a low weight fetus. And those were different studies. One study proved there was increased weight above expected for the fetus, and another study proved that there was low weight. And again, we can't have a lot of controls on these studies because it's not ethical. We need to just take a woman who's in a situation out of her control and see what happens. So different studies are coming up with different things. A lot of these studies are very small because of that reason, because you can't take 2,000 women and manipulate their diet to see if it harms the fetus. There has been proof of slowed growth once born. So once a child is born, they have unusual growth patterns that don't fit what we would consider healthy. They have increased size of brains and organs. So you may think that an increased size of a brain is a good thing, but that's not necessarily a good thing. There's also variance in the size of different brain compartments. There's a little bit of difference as far as the gray matter versus the white matter, and we are seeing that may be related to certain hyperactivity and impact on depression and anxiety. It gets a little bit vague at this point just because of the limitations I've discussed on running studies like this. So the thing is that if you take a step back and look at what carbohydrates provide, it's not just carbohydrate as a nutrient. It's not just 4 calories per gram. It's fruits, which have a lot of fiber and micronutrients. It's vegetables, which have, again, a lot of fiber, a lot of micronutrients, antioxidants. These are really important for health in general. And anything that's important for our health in general is specifically important when you're growing a fetus inside of you. That fetus depends on adequate maternal nutrition. There is also an increase in neural tube defects. So what is a neural tube defect? The neural tube is a tube that runs from the brain down the spine. And a neural tube defect that a lot of people are familiar with is spina bifida, where the neural tube at the base of the spine doesn't properly close, which leaves a lesion. And depending on the size and location of that lesion, the fetus, the child may end up in a wheelchair. They may have to walk on their hands and their feet. They'll have limited mobility, they'll have limited ability. And we're seeing an uptick because of the decrease in carbohydrate consumption. Why is that? Well, because the government, in their infinite wisdom, this is a whole other subject, started to supplement grains with B vitamins, including folic acid. And I did a segment on folic acid versus folate. I strongly prefer people to get this nutrient in its natural context. But when you have different socioeconomic concerns, the fortification of grains turns out to be really important. And the levels, the incidence, how often you would see spina bifida and other neural tube defects crashed when we started supplementing grains. Because as I mentioned, we eat a lot of grains. So when they're supplemented with these nutrients that help prevent neural tube defects, then we take out those carbohydrates from our diet, we're also taking out that important supplementation. And because of that, now we're seeing more spina bifida. We're seeing more different kinds of neural tube defects, which has a drastic impact on the life quality of the fetus. So you have to be very, very careful that if you're on a low carb plan during pregnancy, that you're in touch with a healthcare professional who can adequately guide you toward health. I'm part of the health at every size movement. I'm part of the intuitive eating philosophy, and I believe that your body will tell you what to do. If you are not if you don't believe in those philosophies, it's still very important to be in touch with someone who can guide you to make sure that you, as well as your fetus, are getting adequate nutrition throughout the length of pregnancy. You wanted to go into childbirth and go into that transition in motherhood in the very best way that you can. And taking care of your own health is the number one thing that you can do to benefit that child growing inside of you. That child who incidentally does not care if your arms are big or your stomach is big or your hips are big, because that child is just going to care about the quality of your love and how awesome your hugs are. And I know that doesn't help to ease a lot of body image concerns, but I'll just put it out there anyway. So limited evidence because it's unethical to test. So we just have to go with what we know from the Dutch hunger studies, and you can Google that and see what happened. It's pretty horrific to read, so I'll give you the heads up on that. So thank you so much for joining me for this Naptime Nutrition, my first one back live. Next week, I will be joined by the fantastic Helena, and we're going to talk about food and relationships. And I don't mean your relationship with food specifically. I mean when your spouse tries to control your nutrition. So join me back with that. It's going to be fantastic. She's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to that. And Toddler Test Kitchen. I will soon have some very exciting news about dates at the farm. I'm waiting to hear back from them. They're closed over the summer because it is really hot out here, but we're going to have some dates up on the calendar. So check back at toddlertestkitchen.org or toddlertestkitchen.net. Both of those are mine, but not .com. And sign up for my newsletter to stay on top of all of those dates and any other exciting news. And I do have a lot of exciting news coming down the pipes, so very exciting. So stay tuned. And I'm available for public speaking internationally. I should probably get my passport. So thank you so much for joining me. I am always open to hearing comments and topic suggestions. I want to hear what you want to know. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Nap Time Nutrition every Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. Arizona time, which is currently 4:15 p.m. East Coast and 1:15 West Coast, and something along the lines of 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning in New Zealand. Thank you so much, and see you next week. You won't want to miss it.